Welcome back. You guys love the Mardu Value Engines video, so that means I got the green light to go ahead and make it a series. So today we are going to be talking about Sultai. Now, if you didn't see the previous video, basically what we're going to talk about here is value engines you can create with multiple cards instead of just talking about putting Ristic Study in every deck. We're going to talk about interactions different cards have with each other, how that can lead you to winning the game, and just talk about overall packages that you can shove in your Sultai decks that is going to improve the consistency and give you a lot of value. So let's get right into it after you guys click on that whatnot link and claim your free $15. Additionally, you guys can get 10% off all of your Tolarian Library proxies whenever you use code DT4D. My friends over at Baron of Dice are having a 15% off site-wide sale until the end of October. So now's the time to go pick up those awesome playmats and deck boxes that match. These are high quality and overall just unique. I'm really just in love with the look and feel of these deck boxes. When it comes to these guys, yes, they sponsor me, but I am a customer first. So I had to let you guys know, go get everything while it's 15% off until the end of the month. We're going to kick it off with a bang and talk about one of my favorite synergies we can get off in your very heavy creature-based decks. And this is actually able to be pulled off in mono black as well, but again, I love it in my Sultai decks that just run a ton of creatures. And it revolves Endrek Sahr. Endrek Sahr is a 5 CMC creature, and he says whenever you cast a creature spell, create X 1/1 black thrall creature tokens, where X is the spell's mana value. So 5 CMC creature, you get 5 thralls. And then he says when you control 7 or more thralls, sacrifice Endrek Sahr. So as long as we keep that number below 7, we can keep him on the battlefield. What's really cool here is we're going to pair this with effects that generate mana whenever we sacrifice creatures. Whether it be a Warren Soul Trader, Pitiless Plunderer, or an Ashnod's Altar, all we need to do is generate mana. You know, preferably we do want that mana to be colored, but Ashnod's Altar is still going to make the list as something that's very good here. And then we're able to basically net even on all of our creatures. We cast a 5 CMC creature, we get 5 thralls, we sacrifice 5 thralls to generate 5 mana, and now we can cast another creature. You can even take this synergy one step further and include cards that allow you to draw cards whenever you sacrifice creatures. Smothering Abomination is one of my favorite cards that just does not get talked about enough. This is a 4 CMC creature that says at the beginning of your upkeep, you sacrifice a creature, and whenever you sacrifice a creature, you get to draw a card. What's very powerful about this effect is he doesn't care if it's non-token or not. And a lot of effects are limited to non-token creatures, like your Midnight Reaper effects. So the fact that we can just sacrifice tokens to get card advantage with this guy is absolutely massive. And then when you have all of these on the battlefield, you create an insane value engine that allows you to draw cards equal to the number of thralls you're sacrificing while generating mana equal to the amount of thralls you're generating, and you keep generating thralls because you always have creatures in your hand to cast since you're drawing so many cards. Again, very broken if you get all 3 of them on the battlefield, but the point is, even if you don't get all 3 of these on the battlefield, you've got a solid way to generate creatures, you've got a solid sack outlet, and additionally, if you have Smothering Abomination on the battlefield, you're drawing cards. So that's the idea with these value engines. We want to use cards that are useful in the 99 without getting all of the pieces together, and then when you get all the pieces together, you kind of end up winning the game through generating an insane amount of value. Insidious Roots is another card I want to talk about just because of how Sultai works. My Sultai decks, like a lot of other Sultai decks, prioritize mill over card advantage, and I think that's the way it needs to be. It's a lot easier to mill 10 cards into your graveyard instead of drawing 10 cards, and then you can easily generate a lot of cards that allow you to turn your graveyard into your hand. So let's just focus on the mill aspect, sprinkle in a little card advantage, but 9 times out of 10 we're focusing on mill, and then we're trying to get our key pieces out of the graveyard, and that's just going to make the deck more consistent. And then whenever we have cards like Insidious Roots, this is just going to boost that strategy, allowing us to just gain incremental value just by playing the deck. This is a 2 CMC enchantment, 1 black, 1 green. It says creature tokens you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. It also says whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 0/1 green plant creature token, then put a 1/1 counter on each plant you control. Very good here. So now we're generating a board state and ramping every time we get a creature card from our graveyard and put it into our hand or onto the battlefield, right? Really just anywhere, as long as it leaves the graveyard. And that's just going to give us a ton of value, and it can even get insane whenever we pair it with something like Tortured Existence. Tortured Existence is just an amazing card. It always does more than I expect it to. It's 1 CMC, it's an enchantment that says we can pay 1, choose and discard a creature card, and return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. So it's basically something that just grabs you your key pieces out of your graveyard, puts it directly into your hand, and we just have to discard a creature we don't need. Very good for reanimation decks as well, because now it gets those big creatures out of your hand, and now we can grab the castable creatures from our graveyard into our hand. Not only does it do that, it also just triggers Insidious Roots, because we're getting a creature to leave our graveyard. This synergy also gets absolutely insane whenever you pair it with something that can allow our creatures to tap as though they had haste. Something like a Tyvar. Now those creatures are able to tap immediately, meaning we can always generate that black mana, and we can kind of just switch 2 creatures in and out of the graveyard infinitely to generate an infinite board state of infinitely strong plants. Now you would need another payoff to win the game, but it's not hard to win once you have infinite creatures, especially if you're leaning into that aristocrat strategy. And I'm just saying, this is what we're looking for whenever we're talking about value engines. I love Tortured Existence, I love Insidious Roots, and I love Tyvar. Put them all together and you're just going to win the game. Last but not least, we could include Kennen in this as well, and now you have infinite mana, but I mean, that's just adding insult to injury at that point, especially when you can activate his ability an infinite amount of times after that and just kind of win the game. The next value engine we're going to be talking about is 6 paired with Life from the Loam. If you guys have been a fan of my deck techs, you guys know that I like to put this in a ton of strategies that care about casting cards from the graveyard because of how consistent this is. 6 is a very powerful card, 3 CMC, 2 generic, and 1 green. It has reach, and whenever 6 attacks, you get to mill 3 cards. You may put a land card from among those into your hand. What's really important here is for those strategies that care about cards entering the graveyard and then leaving, you're still milling those 3 cards. So you mill those 3 cards, and then you'll actually return that land from your graveyard. So for all of you Tyvar players and all of you Insidious Root players, this guy can consistently trigger your Insidious Roots. And then he says, as long as it's your turn, non-land permanent cards in your graveyard have retraced, meaning all we have to do is discard a land card, and now we can cast all non-land permanent cards from our graveyard, which is absolutely insane. This guy effectively turns your entire graveyard into your hand. Life from the Loam is a 2 CMC sorcery, again in green, so this is a mono green synergy, if you will. And then it says return up to 3 target land cards from your graveyard to your hand, and then it has dredge 3, meaning if we were to draw a card, instead we can mill 3 cards and return this card to our hand. So this can return itself to our hand, and we're able to put lands into our hand. That way we can trigger 6 as much as we want, as long as we have mana to cast those spells. Whenever we pair this with something like the Gitrog monster, we're able to discard those land cards with 6, right? And that's going to allow us to draw 3 cards, meaning we can go ahead and dredge Life from the Loam, returning it to our hand. So with these 3 cards here, we're able to kind of just cast whatever we want from our graveyard, as long as we have enough mana to do so. So we get card advantage, we get milled, because remember, we're milling 3 times every time we dredge the Life from the Loam. We're drawing the other 2 cards off of the 6. So again, it fits the category we're looking for. They're all amazing on their own. Gitrog is amazing card advantage. Life from the Loam is able to grab all of those utility lands that we love in these colors, which we are also going to talk about in this video. And then 6, again, consistent mill, and kind of just allows you to turn your graveyard into your hand. Now, the reason I love Life from the Loam in Sultai decks specifically is, 1, it helps out with the mill, but additionally, like I said earlier, we have a ton of utility lands that I love to get repeated use out of. We have Shifting Woodlands. This guy has won me games. It's a land that says it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a forest, which 9 times out of 10, it just enters untapped. And then for 4 mana, if we have Delirium, we can turn Shifting Woodlands into any permanent card in our graveyard until end of turn. So now that combo piece you're missing, or maybe that one piece you're missing to turn on your insane value engine, is in your graveyard for 4 mana. Now it's on the battlefield. This also gets past any restrictions like haste and stuff like that. So if you need to tap something immediately, you can turn Shifting Woodlands into it, and now it doesn't have summoning sickness. There's just a lot of utility here that can just cause you to win the game a turn faster and not have to jump through hoops to try to get a card out of your graveyard. Cephalid Coliseum. This is a land that says add 1 1 blue to your mana pool, and then it deals 1 damage to you. But if you have Threshold, you can pay 1, sacrifice this land, and target player gets to draw 3 cards, then discard 3 cards. So a land that's able to rifle you through your deck, and again, we have a lot of ways to return land cards either from our graveyard in these colors, or just straight up return them to our hand. Boseiju Who Endures, we all know this one. This can get rid of lands, it can get rid of enchantments, it can get rid of artifacts. The utility on Boseiju is insane, and the fact that we can return it back to our hand multiple times is very, very powerful, especially in those games that can go longer and you have to snipe away those key pieces. Otawara is also a land that's very valuable and can easily snipe away those key pieces. It has a channel ability as well, so they can't even counter it. Same with Boseiju. You can discard Otawara, and then you get to return target artifact, creature, enchantment, or planeswalker to its owner's hand. This is again one of those powerful cards that can snipe a key piece and stop an opponent from winning the game that turn. Tekanuma Abandoned Mire, not only is this consistent mill, but it can also return cards from the graveyard. So again, when we're talking about the strategy that wants to consistently at least get 1 card out of your graveyard, now we have a land that can do that. We can discard it, and then we get to mill 3 cards and return target creature or planeswalker card from our graveyard to our hand. Since we're kind of on the strategy that cares about cards entering the graveyard and then leaving it, let's go into that first, but I still have a ton to talk about in this video. Tevil's Judgment. This is a perfect example of the cards I'm talking about or going to talk about. This is a card that says whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, you get to choose one that hasn't been chosen. You can draw a card, create a treasure token, or create a 2/2 black zombie druid creature token. I've noticed we've recently gotten a strategy that cares about individual cards leaving the graveyard consistently. With Tevil, with Tevil's Judgment, you've got your Tormod. There's a ton of cards that do this. So with that being said, we're going to talk about some cards that trigger it consistently and generate you value while you're doing it. Because the goal is to not make it feel weird when you're getting those cards out of your graveyard. You want it to feel seamless and you want it to generate value. So without further ado, that's kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about these cards. The first one we're going to talk about is Titan's Nest. This is 4 CMC, 1 generic, and then Sultai colors. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, you get a look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard. And then it has a broken ability, and I can't stress that enough. You can exile a card from your graveyard and add 1 mana. Spend this mana only to cast colored spells without X in its mana cost. So very, very strong here. You can just exile cards from your graveyard to generate mana. Not only does that trigger all of the leaves the battlefield effects, it also just allows you to generate a ton of mana. And I do want to stress this. People need to get more comfortable with exiling cards from their own graveyard. I understand it's looked at as losing value, but I also need you to understand if you have 6 creature cards in your graveyard and one of them is just way better than the other ones, and that's the card you need out of your graveyard, you really only care about that 1 creature card in your graveyard at that moment. So getting rid of the other 5 is not that much of a loss, and to get rid of the other 5 to generate 5 mana to cast the 1 card you need is just going to make it to where you're able to win that game. Remember, we have 100 cards in our library and we're milling a ton of cards into our graveyard, so exiling them is something we need to get comfortable with, and it's something that's going to allow you to win more games. Ripples of Undeath, we all know this one. This one says at the beginning of your main phase, you get to mill 3 cards, then you can pay 1 and 3 life to return one of those cards to your hand. Again, you've already milled that card and you're returning it to your hand, so it's going to trigger all of those Tevil-esque effects, and it's going to generate you a ton of value and mill you at the same time while you're at it, effectively drawing you 3 cards per turn. It's insane. I think this just goes in any black deck almost. It would have to be a very specific build for me not to want this, if that makes sense. Then we have 3 cards that kind of all fit in the same vein. We have your Rampant Fragrantua, Overlord of the Belmerk, and Burrogoyf. These are all cards that mill a set amount of cards and then allow you to return cards from those milled cards to your hand. With Belmerk, it's any creature. With Burrogoyf, it's a creature that you milled. And with Rampant Fragrantua, it's specifically lands that you milled. I also like Rampant Fragrantua because it's kind of like a mini game to see how fast you can kill a player, because once you do kill a player, this guy's going to get +10/+10 until the end of the game. He's also really good whenever you start talking about power matters strategies. You can easily kill 1 player, and then now you have a 13/13 for 3 mana that you can sacrifice Ruthless Technomancer to for 13 treasure tokens. So he kind of scales amazingly into the late game. Nirdev is one of those cards I think a lot of people missed. This is a 3 CMC legendary Merfolk rogue. She says whenever Nirdev becomes tapped, target player mills cards equal to its power. It's already a 2/2, but it also says whenever you cast a spell from your graveyard or activate an ability of a card in your graveyard, you get to draw a card and put a 1/1 counter on it. So it's mill, card advantage, and it gets bigger and better throughout the course of a game. Honestly, insane if you're casting consistently from your graveyard. Doc Arlock is also insane if you're casting consistently from your graveyard. It's a 2 CMC creature, 1 green, 1 blue, and he says spells you cast from your graveyard cost 2 less to cast. That's just insane. Yes, we love that. Another card I want to mention that slots perfectly into this strategy and that has just won me games is Colossal Grave Reaver. This is an 8 CMC creature, but who's casting creatures in Sultai, am I right? He has flying, and whenever this creature enters or attacks, you get to mill 3 cards, and then he says whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from your library, you may put one of them onto the battlefield. So he's just straight up turns your mill into reanimation. And remember, that creature is hitting the graveyard first, and then we're reanimating it, so it's triggering all of your Insidious Root effects. Another card I've been shoving in all of my Sultai decks is Symbiote Spider-Man, 2 CMC, and then you have hybrid, blue or black. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, look at that many cards from the top of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. So you're milling a ton. This isn't going to trigger your Insidious Root effects, but this next ability is going to sell you on this card. If this card's in your graveyard, you can exile it for 3 CMC, and then it says you get to put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. It gains this card's ability, activate only as a sorcery. So if you have a 5 or 6 power commander in your command zone, just shove this guy in your deck. Now your commander is a 7/7, and you're not only milling 7 cards, but you're basically putting one of those cards into your hand every turn. So mill 6, draw 1, insane card selection, and insane mill at the same time. And this guy's just going to end up in your graveyard at some point anyway, so you can easily just, toss him to the grave. And then once he ends up there, we exile him, and then we get a ton of value off of our pretty big commander. And I will say, Sultai is one of those colors that just has historically pretty big commanders. This guy, I think, is going to be in a lot of people's decks once they catch on to how good this is. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about, if anybody's been a fan of this channel or been watching me for a while, they already know we are going to talk about Power Matters. Specifically, we're going to talk about Power Matters value engines and Power Matters cores. Now, there is a lot of cards that have very high power that you don't have to put in a dedicated Power Matters strategy, and it's just going to fit seamlessly into your aristocrat strategies. So we're going to talk about those ones first, and then we're going to talk about just a couple of cards you can throw into your deck that have high power. They don't do much, but whenever you have something like a Greater Good on the battlefield, it can kind of be the best card in the deck, especially when you pair it with a 6, because now you're drawing a ton of cards, you're getting lands into your hand, and then you can easily discard lands to recast that giant creature from your graveyard. And the big thing about the creatures we're going to be talking about in this list or in this section is they're all going to be very, very low CMC, because you want very low CMC and high power. That way, at some point with your Ruthless Technomancers and all of your other mana generators, at some point you actually net positive, and it kind of becomes a net gain to cast these from your graveyard, sacrifice them to Ruthless Technomancer, then you sacrifice Ruthless Technomancer, and then you cast them again from your graveyard. And it can just get really, really absurd very quickly, so let's get right into it. The first one, kind of agnostic. You guys can play this card in any Sultai deck, and it's Hogak Arisen Necropolis. This is a 7 CMC creature. Now, you will want some payoffs for this guy, like your Altar of Dementias and your Greater Goods, but I think the majority of Sultai decks are just going to be on those cards. You can even put in your Altars of the Wretched as well. This is a card that's very good with Hogak because it allows you to draw 8 cards and mill 8 cards whenever you sacrifice Hogak to it, and it can also return itself from the graveyard, while also being a big creature itself if you go ahead and craft this with Hogak. So this can be very, very strong in a deck that's not very Power Matters focused, but if it is Power Matters focused, it just does get more insane. But let's read Hogak. Hogak is a 7 CMC creature that you can't spend mana to cast. Instead, you have to either convoke it or delve him. This means you're either exiling cards from your graveyard to cast him, or you're going ahead and tapping creatures to cast him. Now, if people don't understand how convoke works, I know a lot of people get confused on this, but Convoke actually can pay for colored pips as long as the creature you're tapping has the color in its mana cost. So as long as we have 2 green or 2 black creatures on the battlefield and we exile 5 cards from our graveyard, boom, we've got a free 8/8 that we can do whatever we want with. And that's kind of where the value comes into play. We're sacrificing this to Greater Good to draw 8 cards, we're sacrificing it to Altar of Dementia to mill 8 cards, and we're doing all of those Power Matter strategy things. Even, your Ruthless Technomancer effect is going to enter and then just generate 8 treasure tokens. It feels really, really gross. What's so powerful about these Hogak engines is 9 times out of 10, he's going to generate you enough value to go ahead and do it again, right? In the case of Altar of Dementia, we're milling 8 cards, and we only need to exile 5 to go ahead and cast them again, and we need 2 other creatures to go ahead and generate enough mana to cast them. So as long as we have 2 more creatures, we can not only mill 8 cards, 9 times out of 10, we're milling 16 cards. He's just a very, very solid value engine. The next card we're talking about is Uro. Again, this just works in any deck that has Sultai in it. It doesn't have to be a dedicated Power Matters deck, and he kind of does something very similar to Hogak, but you will need a decent amount of mana to do it. He's a 3 CMC creature, and it says when he enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless it escaped, and then it says whenever he enters, we get to draw a card, we can put a land from our hand into play, and we get to gain 3 life. And then he has escape for 4 mana, 2 green and 2 blue, and then we can exile 5 other cards from our graveyard. Or we have to exile 5 other cards from our graveyard. He's a 6/6 that we can cast from the graveyard, and he gives us consistent value. Now, this guy isn't going to do the broken things Hogak does, but just being able to escape this guy from the graveyard, sacrifice him to greater good to draw 6 cards is still very, very good. Now, let's talk about some newer guys that I've been seeing. I haven't got a chance to try these out yet, but I have no doubt these are going to be very, very good. The first one is Sandman, actually. 1 generic, 2 green. He says Sandman's power and toughness is each equal to the number of lands you control. Sandman can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, and then for 5 mana, we can return this card and land card from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So we can grab a land, he grabs himself, and he can put himself directly back onto the battlefield from the graveyard. Now, this guy's going to be very, very good because he's self-returning, and he's just going to be a big body. This guy scales into the late game. If we have 6 lands, he's a 6/6, and now we're sacrificing him to Ruthless Technomancer. We're bringing him back because now we've generated 6 treasure tokens. It's just going to be a solid big body that we don't care if is in our graveyard, that we can always bring back to sacrifice to our value engines that care about sacrificing creatures with big power. The other one is Galta. This one's just tried and true. He's a 12/12 that costs 12 mana, but his cost gets reduced by the power we have on the battlefield. So 9 times out of 10, this guy's just straight up 2 green pips for 12 power. This guy with Ruthless Technomancer and a way to consistently cast creature cards from your graveyard goes absolutely insane and will 9 times out of 10 result in you winning the game. Bebop and Rocksteady, not released yet, but I'm excited to try these 2 out. 1 generic and then hybrid black and green twice, so 3 mana overall. And it says whenever they attack or block, you sacrifice a permanent unless you discard a card. I like the fact that they are a discard outlet, and they're also a 3 CMC creature that's a 7/5. So 7/5, 3 mana, we are in the realm of Power Matters and wanting this. And the reason I like discard outlets is because you can discard those cards that you're trying to reanimate. We all know there's a ton of reanimation style effects in these Sultai colors, so pitching something that's 8 CMC to instantly reanimate it because we cast Bebop and Rocksteady at turn 3 is just going to be very, very good, especially when someone's also just taking 7 damage to the face. Doom Whisperer, this guy is just straight up Grizzlebrand. No one will convince me otherwise. It's a 5 CMC Grizzlebrand. 5 mana, it's a flying trample. The only thing it doesn't have is lifelink, but then you can pay 2 life to surveil. So you look at the top 2 cards, you can put them directly into their graveyard if it's not what you want. So you wait till you have a draw trigger on the stack, and you basically just keep surveilling till you find the card you need, and then boom, it's now directly into your hand. And he also just keeps milling you in his consistent mill. As long as you have a way to offset that life loss, you're going to really, really love this guy. And even if you don't have a way to offset the life loss, you do not care because this effect is so powerful. Culling Ritual, you will be able to rebuild faster than 90% of the other color pairings. This is a 4 CMC sorcery. It says destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less, and then you get to add any combination of either black or green to your mana pool equal to the amount of permanents destroyed this way. So not only is it a soft board wipe that sets your opponents back while catapulting you ahead of them. Again, very good because we can just rebuild faster than them. That's going to do it for all of the cards and synergies we're talking about today. Don't forget to leave a like if this helped you out, and comment down below if you're enjoying the series and would like to see it continue. With that being said, I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.